What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and I am honored to have a veteran in both boxing and professional MMA, Wreck-It Randy McCarty. Wreck-It Randy, how's it going, my man?
Good man, and you. Thank you for letting me come on.
Dude, thank you. And a warm shout out to Everett Osmer, who he's kind of the MVP and he's connected us. And this is just awesome that this combat sports community can kind of come together in this weird time and talk about fight, fight stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. I
You just got you just got done training, right? So where are you getting your training done? I mean, you're out there in New Mexico, and Albuquerque is kind of like the hotbed for MMA with Jackson Wink. I actually lived for a little bit in Las Cruces.
okay.
So yeah. But how is everything going down in New Mexico right now?
Uh, Overall, everything's good. People get spooked and all that with the virus stuff, but I train at Briggs MMA, and everybody there is willing to roll and fight with each other and have fun. And then I train at Doniana Boxing as well, which is a little small boxing gym close to where I live. So I do half of my workouts at each place. Um,
That
the one Doniana is a free. It's a free place to box. Like any kids can come for free and stuff. The county covers it, but um, I go there and I have a key, so I go and train whenever nobody else is there and have fun.
and that's a really good way to kind of get around, the social distancing and everything. If you got the key, so fighters out there, if you want to get some training in or whatever, just
Yeah,
ask your coach for the key to the gym, right?
that helps, but you don't have to earn it.
Now, I mean, did you guys actually kind of close down, or what was like the gym kind of life like in the last 3 months? Obviously, you're a fit guy, preparing for a fight in hopefully in boxing,
Right.
but what is it like? I mean, was there any lull where the gyms completely shut down?
Yeah, they had 2 months where my jujitsu gym completely shut down, and there was no official grappling or anything. And so I did boxing and kickboxing and lifting at Doniana because we have the key, not because it was open. It was shut down as well, but we did it underneath in the quiet, in the down lower, whatever they call it.
And was there any lapse in terms of your training? Like, where was there ever a point where you couldn't go, or you just had open access?
No, I can go anytime, and then we have a whole bunch of open land around, so I can always go running, go hiking, do outdoor stuff. And what was crazy to me is whenever they did the beginning of the shutdown was um, more people that never came out to where I go were all walking around in what I called my area. So behind my house, and so I had to deal with more people actually because of the COVID junk than I should have.
Yeah, and you know what? That's we've kind of seen it in the kind of COVID era of UFC fights. A lot of fighters, namely who is it? The gentleman who Mickey Gall, who knocked out CM Punk. He in his fight, his cardio, is despite being the younger fighter, in the Mike Perry kind of a matchup, I mean, his gas tank pretty much ran out because he wasn't able to train. So that's not something that you have to go through.
No, no, I'm just keep pushing. There can't be any excuses or anything like that when you're doing the getting in a ring or a cage. It's all on you at that point.
That's excellent. Now your journey to combat sports. I mean, it obviously you liked it and loved it and what have you, but I mean, you kind of entered the combat sports realm at a time where most fighters are kind of entering their twilight years and kind of looking to hang it up. How did that happen?
So I grew up in a small town. 3,000 people was our maximum amount of people we had in our town. And so my dad taught me karate all my life, and I did tournaments and stuff like that. And then when I got older, I went in the Navy. I boxed in the Navy for 6 years and had fun in there. but when I got out of the Navy, I really didn't have anything to do. I didn't want to just lift weights just to lift weights. But went in the Navy when I was 26, and I got out at 32.
Looks like Randy froze for a little bit, but he was talking about his kind of career in Navy boxing, which is awesome because those formative kind of sparring sessions. There he is. There you go.
Back.
Absolutely. So you were talking about your career in the naval boxing program.
So I boxed for the Navy for 6 years, while I was in the Navy, it was about 6 years that I boxed. And then I got out and I didn't have any real work to keep me in shape. So I started training to fight, and I wasn't sure if I was going to fight or not, but I was 36 when I had my first amateur MMA fight, and everybody asked me what they thought I was going to do, and I said I need to get more cardio. So after that happened, I just kept training. 39, I went pro, and I'm now 46 years old, and I have 32 fights, both boxing and MMA together. So I stay busy.
That's awesome. Now, obviously, having that kind of that foundation in boxing, what was the transition to MMA like? You got into that, on an amateur level. What was that transition? What was like the hardest to learn? Because I mean, you've got submission wins in your win column and what have you, and you're a heavyweight. My goodness, so heavyweights with good ground base, especially bases that started in a striking discipline, that's really cool. But I mean, it had to be a bit unnerving, that kind of first kind of jiu-jitsu session, primarily being a striker, right?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to do MMA, and to try it, I had to do groundwork. So I grappled for 2 years before I even had my first amateur fight. I just trained for 2 years to get better at the ground. And my first amateur fight, I submitted the guy. And I've submitted quite a few people as an amateur and less as a pro, but I just enjoy the whole fight all the way around.
Now, at this juncture in your career, I mean, is there any one, like, I guess, method of competing that you like, more MMA, more boxing, or do you like it both equally?
So that's a challenge because I get more money boxing than I do MMA, but I have more challenges than MMA. So if I sit there and say that I like MMA better, then the boxing round's like, he really doesn't want to box, and they won't give me fights. But then if I say the boxing side, most MMA guys, it's a dangerous ground to go on. I honestly enjoy both sides of it differently.
And that's awesome. It's still a student of the game, regardless of whatever. And it's kind of weird, right? Where, boxing, even, after the whole Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor deal, or even if you look at like James Stoney versus Randy Couture, there's been iterations. Oh, I mean, come on, Ali and Moki, right? There's been iterations of kind of mixed martial arts, happening, and they're kind of intertwined. But, the two communities, the purists, whatever that term means, the purists seem to be kind of dead set against, each other, but they mirror each other so greatly.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they want to feel like mine's better or mine's more superior than yours. And if you're an MMA guy, your hands are sloppy. If you're a boxer, your ground game sucks. So if you can be good at all that just brings your game to another level. I mean, I've boxed with guys that like Austin Trout. I mean, he's fought with Canelo and big names like that. And he tells me that the best part about my game is my boxing, or is my jab. He says, I really need to believe in my jab. He says, because I've hit him many times with it. He's hit me with other stuff too, but it's still it's a good thing to have confidence in different aspects of your game, not just I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu, or I'm just a boxer. You need to be able to be solid all the way around.
Yeah, and it's really awesome because that you have that type of mentality, because there are some jiu-jitsu black belts, and I've seen it on the amateur scene where they kind of enter a fight because they are trying to show their students like, hey, that thing that I taught you in class all last week, it works,
Yeah.
And then all what happens is they get punched and coming from a striking a grappling discipline, they're not used to it, and sometimes they don't weather the storm. They'll actually take an L because they're just primarily in, jujitsu. And it's funny that Rose Namajunas is fighting on Fight Island tonight because her fiance Pat Barry, he was a
Yeah.
straight up, kickboxer, and he actually retired from the sport of MMA and went to Glory right before he retired to Coach Rose because
Yeah.
he didn't want to learn the ground at all. So it's cool that you have that mentality that you just want to get the whole scheme of everything.
Thanks.
Now, are there any particular fighters that you'd like to emulate? Obviously, we talked about you being a heavyweight and having grappling prowess, right? I think the most famous grappler in terms of like jujitsu for the heavyweight division is probably former UFC heavyweight champions Frank Mir and Fabricio Werdum, respectively.
Mhm.
Is that kind of your ethos, to kind of be like that guy, or is Wreck-It Randy just his own entity?
I don't know. I like Frank Mir. Frank Mir's a pretty cool dude all the way around. I've got to meet him a few times, and I've never got to roll with him, and I would love to roll with that guy. But he's a tough dude. He's handled a lot of different people, and he's went from that what's his name, the big old huge white dude with
Lesnar.
yeah, Lesnar down and beat him, and that guy thought he was all bad. It's not always about that, but he'll hooked him good.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to have fun and fight at least to 50 fights, and then after that we'll see what's going on. And so I have 18 more fights that I want to hit, and it gets more and more challenging, especially with the COVID junk making you not be able to have so many fights. I had 2 fights as of February for this year, and then I haven't had anything since. So normally my average is 7 to 8 fights a year, and I've hit 10 once. My goal is to hit 12 in 1 year. So if I can do that, I could get my 50 fights in.
And that's a interesting mentality that you have. You're looking about the quantity of fights. There are fighters that are just like, hey, I want to pull off that submission that I had in class. I want to pull that off on a big stage, or I have this particular hook shot. I want to kill somebody with a liver shot or something like that, or this championship or fight, whatever. You're just like, I don't care where it is. That 12 fight a year, 50 fight in my career. That's the goal. And I think that's really cool that you are kind of blazing a trail in your own path.
Thanks. Yeah, the biggest thing I would take an offer if UFC offered me a fight. I would say yes. I wouldn't even ask who it was against. I'd just say yes. But but I'm pretty sure they're not going to call me at 46 years old. That just, you don't normally see that happen. I bugged Bellator's fight matchmaker. I've bugged him for months at a time, and so far it hasn't happened. But it really depends on who you know more than what you know. And so I would love to get on those stages, but until then, I'll fight wherever you let me get a fight at. I fought in Mexico. I fought all over the U.S. And if I could go to Canada or to Europe, sign me up. I'll go, especially Asia too.
Yeah, man. Of course, when you're talking about martial arts, whether it be, Chinese boxing or karate, jeet kune do, judo and what have you, it is that Asian kind of sector that pretty much helped establish, martial arts as a whole. And, who wasn't a Pride fan of the 90s that didn't want to fight at Saitama Super Arena,
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Now, there's this kind of like COVID era of like MMA fighting. Like here in California, it looks like there's probably not going to be fights for the rest of the year, boxing or MMA. CSAC, the California State Athletic Commission, pretty much put the kibosh to it. And they're not saying until, January, but it looks like that. We're entering this new COVID era. Obviously, there's Fight Island tonight. We've had, quite a few fights at the UFC Apex Center. There are fights in Florida, both in the UFC and regional. We just had
Yeah.
a fight in South Dakota with LFA, and LFA are actually doing, 4 straight title fights, 4 straight Fridays of fighting with no arena. What do you
Yeah.
think about that? I mean, not no arena, but no fans. What do you think about that no fans type scenario? What do you think about it? Have you caught any of those?
Yeah, I've watched almost every one of them, but every one that I can, at least I try to. I think the biggest challenge is going to be, it's going to ruin the amateur side of it, the up and comers, because you either have to have somebody that knows somebody to get up on LFA or onto UFC or Bellator, or you have to not fight. It's gonna stifle a lot of the newer people for a while. I'm stuck on the small stages for right now, and it's a big challenge. Like if you do LFA and you have a contract with the TV station and all that, they have the money to be able to pay you, but most of the time the people get paid through their ticket sales. I normally sell, when I fight at home, I normally sell $4,000 to $6,000 worth of tickets myself personally for that fight. So I don't get all that money, but I get some of it. So that's the way I make my money is through ticket sales. So for small shows, I don't see how they can even get it done. I mean, you're gonna have to either choose to get to be on a big show and them allow you to, or you don't get to fight anymore.
Yeah, and I've even seen some promotions where they will actually have fighters pay. Oops, I might have slipped on that, to fight. Kind of like almost a payola type deal. For combat sports, and then they write the whole thing off because of a TV deal. They pretty much write the whole thing off as a production expense. So the arena and everything like that, and the it's pretty much cannon fodder in terms of the fan base, which is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, definitely. Because the fans is really where you get your money from, and that's where you get to, like, the reason I get to fight in whenever we have them in town is because I do that. Like, the closest person, I think the last time I sold tickets for my hometown was, the closest person was like $4,000 less than me. Of course, the promoter's going to let me fight for him. Like, brings that much extra money in. So fan base is really where it comes from, and it's really a lot of fun to be at a show. I like going to the UFC. I like going to LFA or any of the shows that I'm not fighting on. I still like going and supporting other fighters, and it's an exciting venue there. But on TV, it's cool, but it's not as cool.
Yeah, there's nothing that beats live combat sports, whether it be boxing or MMA, even jiu-jitsu. You go to like some of the bigger ones like Eddie Bravo Invitational, or Fight to Win and whatever, and it's like it's an experience. It's not just like you're getting the highest level of competition, but it's the spectacle, and so you're not really getting it in the and even the atmosphere, like you said, the people that support each fighter, and people might be there to see another fighter and they see Wreck-It Randy and they're like, man, I like that dude, and I jump on the bandwagon, and the next time it's time to sell tickets, they're in your corner and you get to convert people. It's amazing.
I was up in New York fighting, and I didn't sell any tickets. Nobody. The guy I was fighting was from from Buffalo, or not Buffalo, but Niagara Falls, and they were sold out arena, like 4,000 people, completely sold out. When I came in, they booed. I loved it. I was like, all right, they're all for him. When they got cheered, they cheered for him. We go out there, we fight, have a blast. At the end, they were cheering for me and him. They were supporting both. It was really good. The commission comes up to my coach and was telling him, hey, that was the best coaching I've ever seen. You guys are very humble. You guys traded shirts at the end. So I'm going to have you, anytime you guys want to come back, if you have any problems, you call me. I'll take care of it. So that's a good thing to have. It's cool to see that stuff.
Yeah, and especially with the commission, and regardless of what you do, to gain the clout of your peers, the respect of your peers, that's that's what anybody should ever hope for. And then to do it, especially in a kind of, I mean, a crazy atmosphere of combat sports, it's just like, man, you've done something. I began my career because a lot of whether it be the CAMO, which is the amateur organization out here in California, or the CSAC, they'd be like, hey, you want to do interviews? And then I'd get snuck in the back door, and then, within a couple months I get credentials and like, oh, you're not there. But I mean, it's again, to earn that respect of the peers, that means more than any one payday could ever could ever do.
Absolutely.
Now, what is the local scene in New Mexico like for fighters? That, I mean, obviously we know Jackson Wing, but where you are there local shows that happen in and around, or do you have to go into Arizona or other states to kind of cut your teeth?
So pre-COVID, there was a group that's called American Fight League, and they would bring at least 3 to 4 times a year. They would come to Las Cruces area. So they'd go Las Cruces, Alamogordo. Normally that's because there's an Air Force base there. They would fight it there or here. And it was from a guy that's a Navy SEAL, and he's the promoter of it. And he would he would have 3, maybe 4 pros, and then the rest were amateurs. So you'd have 10 amateur fights and then 4 pro fights. And he does really good for the area. A long time ago, we had Roctagon that would come through, but it's kind of wishy-washy to a point. I mean, we don't have anything steady, and we don't have enough. Like our town's 100,000 people, so if you don't support it, then they're not going to come. The promoters need to make their money as well. So.
Yeah, and you highlighted a very important fact that and why you kind of theorize that the amateur or even regional shows that don't have TV programming or a streaming service will suffer is because of the fact that yes, it takes money to run a promotion. A lot of people kind of peg promoters to be these kind of shysters and what have you, but the thing about it is it's when you're going through licensing of the commission, to pay the commission to be there, insurance for all of the fighters that are there, you have to take out like $100,000 policy in a lot of cases, with a $10,000 to $15,000 deposit, and it becomes maddening.
It's expensive, that's for sure. There's no doubt that it's expensive for them to run it, but they also, I mean, you look at how much money the UFC makes compared to how much the fighters make, and it's 1% to 3% of the money the fighters make. But I mean, we at the same time, like, I could get on this little tangent of whining about money and stuff, but I really like to fight. So I don't care about the money as much as the average person. And if I've agreed to fight for $1,000, give me $1,000. I'm not going to be mad if I find out he had 7. I'll just go, hey man, like, what'd you do? How'd you figure that out so that you could make more money? I'll go ask him. I'm not going to be offended that you agreed to something better than I did.
Yeah, and that's again, a student of the game, because you could be the most exciting fighter in the gym or whatever, but if you aren't able to kind of connect the dots and put it all together, even the business acumen, we see so many fighters. I mean, none other than Chuck Liddell. A lot of our heroes, right? They come back for that one more fight, and it literally is the death of them, and the death of the legacy that they did. So the fact that you're able to kind of intuitively look at, see what the other guys are doing and learn from that. I mean, that just shows kind of your passion to become adaptable to all sides of combat sports, not just the fighting aspect of it, but the business side as well.
I appreciate it, man.
Now, I got to mention, because we're not even in the eve. We're like hours away from Fight Island. What are your kind of initial impressions, of the event itself, and any fights in particular that you're looking forward to?
All the championship ones and Rose's, I'm excited a lot for Rose. I love watching Rose fight. She's amazing. But my thing that I'm kind of curious about is I fought in Harlingen, Texas one time, which was right on um, the water, really close to the water, and there was so much humidity, and we fought outside. And then when you watch the previews for the Fight Island, they're right on the beach. So I'm really interested about how slippery the floor is going to be and how that's going to be. Like, we had guys that threw a kick and fell and broke their finger because they're trying to catch themselves in that humidity. I'm really interested to see how the humidity is in Dubai for this fight. But if they control the elements better in that aspect, it's going to be fun to watch all them, at sea level. There's not going to be any excuses about cardio at that point.
Yeah, and actually, right before we jumped on, they actually the UFC basically put out on YouTube, the making of Fight Island, this kind of mini doc, and it was like part one, and what it looks like, because the initial impressions that Dana White gave us from his Facebook and social media posts from last week, it looked like it was like right on the beach, and yes, it is, but they have like some sort of like awning, and I don't know if they're blowing air conditioning through it or what have you, because temperatures in Dubai, in the UAE, can go in excess of 125 degrees, so that's a factor.
Yeah, huge factor. I mean, I've been in Singapore and Thailand where it's 115 and 100% humidity, and it's just miserable. So I couldn't imagine fighting in that would be horrible.
Yeah. It's and even just to be in the crowd, and we don't know at this juncture if there's going to be a crowd or not. I mean, obviously, the fighters had to go probably through the stringent testing that any kind of fight promotion has gone through, in the UFC included. They've kind of outdone themselves, because the fighters were held in Vegas, and they were held for I want to say about 2 weeks. Even the people in the United Arab Emirates, they pretty much quarantined themselves for 14 days. All of the staff, everybody that was going to work on the show, everybody that was going to be even on the planes, because you've got Russian fighters, you've got Brazilian fighters, you've got American fighters, whatever, and there was a chartered plane for each of the staff on the planes. Essentially had to quarantine or self-isolate for 14 days at least to even be considered to work this event. So I mean, it's pretty, I mean, obviously the fight hasn't happened yet, and we've had already a couple positive tests, and Dean Thomas and Mike Brown, in terms of Masvidal's camp and what have you. But it looks to be the most like comprehensive kind of testing and process that we've ever seen.
True. Yeah. I'm excited to watch it, though. It seems like it'll be pretty cool.
Absolutely, and that's the thing about different arenas, and that adds to the ambiance, and that's one of the things that going to shows, local or otherwise, essentially this is what we, combat sports is kind of like a renaissance where the promoters see their vision of fighting, and you see that in the venue, the promotion, and everything like that. That's how they see it. The coaches have their kind of inclination implied. The fighters have their own way, and everybody kind of comes together to see this happen. And the backdrop, I think, is important. I almost hate the fact that if a particular promotion is like in Madison Square Garden or MGM Grand, other than a couple of logos or whatever, it pretty much looks uniform. I want to see that different kind of siding and the different environment.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with you on that. It's always fun to see that stuff. The one up in New York was really cool. They had these screens that whenever you see the fighters, if you watch the screen on the wall, there's probably, I don't know, instead of a guy being 6 foot, he's like 12, 13 feet, because they're just so big of screens. But it was really cool because there's times that you're just at a bad angle and you just look over at the screen and it is huge. And that was kind of a neat setup. And you'd walk out, and where you stood for the camera to film you and stuff, behind you was your stats and your picture and all that type of stuff. And then you walk out and while the crowd's booing me. So that was kind of cool too. I like winning over crowds, so that makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it doesn't, and that's the cool thing about you know combat sports, right? And especially when you train together, right? Or even just being a fan. We've got people of all ethnicities, all religions, all political preferences, all whatever, and we get together and we are side by side, shoulder to shoulder, kind of fighting it out and working it out. And it's funny because most people on the outside will think like, oh, a bunch of fighters, their fight's going to break out. And the only fights that happen at fights are people who don't know how to fight that might have had way too many brewskis.
Yeah, got a little liquid courage in them, and they're ready to go.
Yeah, it's weird. I actually saw at one of the Bellators, a guy kind of fall a couple of rows of seats just because he threw a punch, missed, and just went toppling over.
Wow.
Now, for fans of Wreck-It Randy and people who haven't become fans yet, what is your kind of mission statement in terms of fight? Obviously, you love fighting or what have you, but what is it about you that does kind of turn people into kind of being a fan of yourself?
Well, one of the things that you could probably picture is, or you could look up, is my dance. I come out to Vanilla Ice, the Ice Ice Baby song, and I dance to that before every fight. And that's kind of like, people stopped me in different places in Texas, up in Albuquerque, all the way, and go, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're the fighter that dances, right?" And then they want to take pictures with me, and they're all excited. But I always dance before my fight, and then I'm an exciting fight. I don't ever look for a boring win. I try and stop the fights every time, and that doesn't always happen, but that's my goal. I'm looking for ways to finish the fight and to be victorious as soon as possible.
Yeah, because you don't get paid by the hour for sure.
No.
Now, in terms of how obviously there are fights going on, and you're looking to fill that quota of 12 fights in a year, it doesn't look like it'll happen in terms of 2020. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff in the air. But where can people find you to kind of? I mean, there are promotions that are actually still happening, and how could people trumpet the echo of Wreck-It Randy to their local promoter that might be having fights, or a fight falls out in LFA or whatever? Where can people reach you so they can kind of trumpet your mission statement?
Well, you can look me up as Randy McCarty on Facebook, or you can look me up on Instagram, Wreck-It Randy, and I'm available in any of those things. I have my phone on me all the time, so I'll answer unless I'm at training, and then I'll answer after. But I've actually had, when I was in that fight in New York, when I got back to the backstage after the fight, I looked at my phone and I had a Facebook message saying, "Hey, do you want to fight in 1 month over here in Arizona?" I wrote, like, "Yes." And I took the fight. Then they're all, "Well, do you have your medicals ready?" I was like, "Yeah." And I sent them my medicals because I just had a fight in New York. So they're like, "Man, you're all ready to go." And so I'm willing to do it through Facebook, Instagram, or you can, on my Facebook has my phone number, so you can call me. I don't care. I'll answer whichever way.
There you go. Be like Blondie and call him. I'm just saying, promoters, what are we doing? Let's do that. Now, obviously, you step into the ring and the cage alone, but I mean, like you mentioned, people that remember you, whether it be your exciting fight or your walkout entrance and whatever. Let's get some shout outs out of the way. Who has helped you get to this point?
Well, definitely Jesse Briggs is my coach from Briggs MMA. He's helped me out a lot. He's brought me up in my ground game to levels I never expected to get at. I made my black belt underneath him, which I really appreciate, and worked hard to stay relevant as a black belt, and training hard through him. So I think Jesse Briggs and Briggs MMA for opening their door and allowing me to work with them. Doniana Boxing, like I said before, they give me a key. They let me work out there and punch people at their place and help the kids, which is cool too. Horizon Boulevard Clinic, which is Dr. Ortiz, Sergio Ortiz is his name. He's my chiropractor. He fixes me up, keeps me healthy, does all my cupping, all that type of stuff, so that I'm able to stay healthy, ready for fights. Gimmy's Restaurant is my cousin's restaurant out in Arizona, and they sponsor me and take care of me. Riviera Ortho, they are my dentist, and then Timeless Tranquility gives me massages before every fight, which is amazing. Makes me feel really good. My muscles nice and loose, so I appreciate them. And then Precision Fitness is the one that my coach that helps me with my strength and conditioning. So I'd like to thank all that.
Yeah, and I just saw a video on YouTube. You doing kind of a kind of a workout flow. So that's awesome. That that support is reciprocal.
Thanks.
Excellent. Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining us here today. And you definitely won me over in terms of fan base. And I look forward to see what's coming out of your camp and what the future holds for you.
Awesome, man. Thank you for letting me be on too. I appreciate that. And I'll post it up once I see it on my Facebook.
Excellent. Well, guys, thank you again for another exciting episode of According to Woods with Wreck-It Randy McCarty, and we are out. Thank you, man.